So this has been a long wait for you. I can only imagine what getting the word yesterday must have been like. Tell us about it.
Very relieving. A huge weight was lifted off of us. The unknown was finally known.
How'd you find out?
We found out from a phone call. I mean, maybe an hour before. I mean, we didn't have a huge advance notice. It was kind of late in the day, and we had heard that they'd made their decision, and we were just waiting to see when we would find out.
You were pretty confident, but you never know.
Yes, you never know.
And you had this huge relief in the afternoon, and then all of us last night watching television, we see those protests turn into riots in Ferguson, you know, probably the worst night since August. What's going through your mind when you see that?
The protest? It's just sad. I mean, it's really sad. I mean, that community is really a great community. And it's heartbreaking to see it be torn down and burned and looted, and just no one wants to watch that or have to see that.
Yeah, the St. Louis police chief said the fabric of our community is being torn apart, and you have to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see that happen, is there anything you want to say to the protesters?
I just wish everyone could be peaceful. I mean, that's all you can do is just wish for peace.
Let's go back to August 9th. Let's go back right to the beginning of the day. You're working the day shift.
Correct.
6:30?
Yes.
6:30 to 6:30.
Yes, sir.
So what was happening that day?
Yeah, actually, it was just a normal day. It started off. I mean, I'd started kind of slow. I mean, the sector I was in wasn't a very busy sector. And I was just patrolling my area. You know, I had...
Alone?
Alone, yes. We're always alone in Ferguson. Always one-man cars. I had got some heartburn medicine for my then fiance because she wasn't really coping very well with the heartburn issue. So I did that for her, and then I was just driving around.
And you got a call to help a little baby?
Yes, I did.
What was going on there?
I think it was difficulty breathing, a 2 or 3 month old. They just called, usually whenever someone calls, they call 911. Ferguson would usually answer first and then forward the call to the EMS personnel and fire and all that. And they always send a police car with the ambulance. And so they dispatched me over there. They actually didn't dispatch me. They actually dispatched another car who was busy, and I volunteered to take the call for him.
So you finish up that call, what happens next?
Well, while I was on that call is when I heard the stealing come out from a market. I didn't hear all of it. I was just on my...
Radio call?
Yes, it was a radio call. But I was on my portable walkie. So I got a broken transmission, but I heard bits and pieces. Heard that 2 males were involved. They were going towards the QT. Cigarettes were stolen, and one was wearing a black shirt.
So you get back in your car, go back on patrol?
Yes, I was just leaving the area. Where I was at, there's really only one way in and one way out. And the way that I had to go to get back to my area was that direction. I couldn't really go anywhere else. And I was just leaving. I mean, I was actually on my way to go get lunch.
And you're driving to lunch, and what do you see?
I see 2 individuals who I later became to know as Dorian Johnson and Michael Brown.
You didn't know then?
No, I did not. I saw them walking in the middle of the street, single file, on the double yellow line.
In the middle of the street?
Yes.
And so you keep on driving?
Well, as I got closer to them, I'd stopped and let them approach me. I'd stopped in front of them and let them walk up towards me.
But you're still in the car?
Yes, I never even put the car in park. I didn't drive. And as they walked up, I had asked Dorian Johnson, who was the first one, to walk on the sidewalk. And his reply was, well, we're almost to our destination. And I was like, okay, well, what's wrong with the sidewalk? And then as he passed, he just kept walking, ignoring that, is when Michael Brown came next. And he had exchanged some explicit words with me.
What does that mean?
Can I say it?
Go ahead.
He had said, you have to say.
First words to you?
Yes.
Still in the middle of the street?
Yes.
What do you do then?
Well, when he said that, it immediately drew my attention to him, and it kind of took me aback, because I was like, why would someone have such an aggressive response to just a simple request? And when I looked at him, you know, as law enforcement, we're always trained to look at people's hands. The hands are what will hurt you. And I noticed that his right hand was full of cigarillos. And it kind of all clicked then. You know, the call I'd heard, I was in the vicinity of where they were going. Cigarillos were in his hand. Dorian Johnson was wearing a black shirt. And that's when it hit me that these were the suspects from that stealing.
And he was aggressive in his manner, you say. Cigarillos in his hand. Did you have any sense that he might be armed?
I did not know. I mean, I had no idea. I hadn't heard anything of a weapon, but again, you never know. You know, and after I realized all this is when I put all of it together, and I got on the radio and I asked for assistance because I was going to be on Canfield, which is the street we're on, with 2 suspects.
So what do you say exactly to the radio?
I'm on Canfield with 2, send me another car.
And you're thinking, when you say send me another car, you're expecting then what's going to happen? How long is it going to take?
Maybe 30, 40 seconds, and there's going to be at least 1, probably 2 cars show up.
But right now, you've put in the call. Michael Brown's still in the middle of the street.
Yes.
What happens next?
I backed up because they kept walking, ignored everything I had said.
You're still in the car?
I'm still in the car. I then put the car in reverse, and I backed up just past them and kind of blocked the street and them off. And
So you're kind of in the middle of the street like this?
yeah, it was like if the street's this way, my car was angled that way. It kind of blocked them from escaping, and it just kind of provided a little security for everybody. And I'd gone to open the door and get out of the car. And when I did so, as I was opening the door, I said, "Hey, come here for a minute." And that's when he turned and said, "What the are you going to do about it?" and slammed my door shut on me.
Slam the door shut?
Yes.
So you're trying to get out. He slams the door shut?
Yes.
And?
I, again, taken aback because I've never been trapped in my car, I used my door to try and push him back and yell at him to get back. And again, he just pushed the door shut and just stares at me.
So you're staring each other down?
Yeah, he stares at me and he's like almost over top of me. You know, he looked like he was trying to intimidate me. And as I look back at him, all of a sudden, punches start flying.
He threw the first punch?
Yes. He threw the first one and it hit me in the left side of my face.
Because, you know, some of the witnesses have said that they saw you trying to pull him into the car.
That would be against every training ever taught to any law enforcement officer.
Didn't happen.
No, it did not.
He punched you, and did he land a punch?
Yes, he did. The first one that he hit me in this side of the face, right in this area. And then I don't know what or how many hit me after that. I just know there was a barrage of swinging and grabbing and pulling for about 10 seconds.
So you got 10 seconds. You're in your car seat.
Yes.
You're behind the wheel.
Yes.
He's punched you. What's running through your head?
What's going on? Why is this? I mean, why? What provoked such an aggressive response to really nothing out of the ordinary besides a conversation?
You hadn't had sharp words with him. You hadn't called him anything. You
No.
hadn't yelled at him.
No. My goal when I originally tried to get out of the car was to get out and just talk with him for 30 seconds till backup arrived. And then we could investigate the stealing further. And if arrest needed to be made, we'd have assistance and it would be much safer and more tactical.
So you're trying to figure out what's going on, and what are you doing exactly?
At that time, I was just blocking my face. I mean, my hands had gone up and it was just protection. And then, you know, he stopped, he just stopped suddenly. And when he stopped, I looked up and he's standing, if my car is here, he's standing right on my left side. And he takes his hand and he goes like this to hand something back.
That's his left hand.
Yes.
And what was in his hand?
The cigarillos.
And he handed them to Dorian Johnson?
I couldn't actually see Dorian Johnson, but that's the only other person who was in the area. He was out of my view. And Michael Brown was actually blocking some of that view, but I'm assuming, yes, it was Dorian Johnson.
So you think he'd been hitting you with his right hand and holding the cigarillos in his left hand?
I think he was hitting me with his right with the cigarillos at first, and then switched it at some point to his left, and then handed them off.
And then what?
When he'd done that, I had reached out my window of my right hand to grab onto his forearm, because I was going to try and move him back and get out of the car to where I'm no longer trapped.
That's his right forearm.
Yes, his right forearm. And when I felt it, I just felt the immense power that he had. I mean, the way I've described it is, it was like a 5-year-old holding on to Hulk Hogan. That's just how big this man was.
Hulk Hogan?
He was very large, very powerful man.
You're a pretty big guy.
Yeah, I'm above average. I'm about 210, 215, but you know, from what I've heard, he was around 290.
Yeah, 6'5", 289.
Yes.
So you try to grab him, but you feel that force.
Yes. And then as I'm holding him, I see him coming back around with his left hand, and it's in the shape like this, and it comes in through the window and just a solid punch to the right side of my face.
And that's what caused that redness on the side of your
Yes.
face? Because as you know, there were some reports early on that, you know, you had busted an eye socket, and this didn't come from you, but some
No.
people were expecting far more grievous injuries than we saw in those photos.
Yes. That was nothing to do, I don't know where that came from or how they construed that fact. I mean, the strongest punch I took was that left hand to the side of my face.
So you take that one left hand to the side of your face, it creates some kind of swelling, some kind of redness.
Yes.
But you're still sitting there figuring out, how do I get out of this?
Yes. I mean, the next thing was, how do I survive? Because I didn't know
How
if
do
I
you survive?
Yes, I didn't know if I'd be able to withstand another hit like that. I mean, you hear all the time, one punch and someone gets knocked out, and if I'm knocked out, then what happens to me? Because then I can't defend myself at all. So that was my fear, is if he hits me again, will I be conscious after that hit to still defend myself?
So that's what you're thinking at that moment, I can't get hit again.
Yes.
And what do you do?
I actually went through my progression of how do I get out of this? What do I do? What's my force that I'm allowed to do? And my training just overrode every everything you could ever think. I mean, training just kicked in.
What did your trainer do at that moment?
At first, I went to mace. You know, that's our next step up is, you know, some kind of chemical agent. And my mace is on my left side. But if I would have used that, it would have not only disabled him if it got to him through both our sets of hands, but it would have disabled me. I've been maced before, like when I was in the police academy, and it completely disables me. I can't see it. With the contacts, I mean, there's literally 4 hours of no vision for me.
So you go through the checklist, the mental checklist, you rule out mace.
Yes.
This is all happening in a split second.
Yes. I don't have a taser, so that was never even an option.
Why no taser?
I never carried a taser. They're very uncomfortable, bulky, large, not really a convenient spot to put one. And we're not assigned tasers. It's just your option if you want one, and I've just never elected to carry one.
And then what else can you do?
Well, I have an ASP baton. It's an expandable baton that I carry back here behind me. And when I thought about that, I'm like, well, how am I going to get it out without sacrificing this whole side of my face again? And even if I do get it out, how am I going to expand it inside the car? You know, it's not, we drive Tahoes, which people think they're big cars, but when you put all the police equipment in, you're really kind of cramped in there. And we have a cage that stops at the back, so nothing's open behind me. There's a center console.
So how much room do you have to move here?
This is about it. I mean, I can twist like this and I can twist like this. I don't have room to
And he's right there,
Yes.
looking down on you.
Yes. At some points, he was actually in the car physically. Like he had ducked his head and came into the vehicle with me.
Okay, so you rule out the mace, you rule out the ASP, that leaves.
Well, I have a flashlight that I carry in my bag. But again, how am I going to swing an object that would deliver any type of effective strike to someone in that confined space? So I had to rule that out too. And the only option I left was my firearm. So I withdrew my firearm and I
Where's
pointed it
your gun at that
I
point?
keep it on my right hip. I take it out and I come up, I point it at him.
So you're no longer holding on to his arm with your
No,
right
my
hand.
left hand is now blocking my face and I'm now getting my firearm with my right.
Okay, so show us exactly what you did.
I was like this and I brought my gun up like that. And when I said, get back or I'm going to shoot you. And then his response, immediately, he grabbed the top of my gun. And when he grabbed it, he said, you're too much of a to shoot me. And when he did that, he had twisted it and put it down into my hip and had the barrel dug into the crease of in my left hip. And while he's doing that, I can feel his hand trying to come over my hand and get inside the trigger guard and try and shoot me with my own gun. And at that point, I envisioned a bullet going into my leg. I thought that was the next
So
thing.
both your hands are on the gun at that point?
Yes. This hand's trying to just get it back, and my right hand was on like the pistol.
And his
grip.
hand's over yours?
Yes, it was over top.
What do you do?
I had managed to wiggle, only a couple inches. I just slide over just slightly, and the force of him pushing down actually slid off the side of my leg, and when it slid off, it's now pointing down the floorboard. Well, I didn't have enough strength to pull the gun up, and with just one hand, I couldn't maneuver it. So I took my left elbow and locked it into the back of my seat, and I just pushed as hard as I could like this with both my arms. And I ended up getting it to slide up my leg towards my knee, and when it got to, fully outreached, I noticed it was lined up with the silhouette of his body. And that's when I pulled the trigger for the first time.
What happened?
It didn't go off. The gun was actually being jammed by his hand on top of the firearm. I believe his finger was blocking the hammer from striking the slide.
So you just get a click?
Just a click. So I tried again, and again another click. And this time I'm like, this has to work, otherwise I'm going to be dead. He's going to get this gun away from me. Something's going to happen, and I'm going to be dead. So I pull a third time, and it finally goes off.
Where does it go?
It actually went through the door. Found out later it didn't actually go all the way through the door, but it went into the door. And when it went into the door, my window had been rolled down. So the glass from the window then exploded out from the door. And when it exploded, I just remember seeing a big chunk of glass come over my hand, and I see blood on my hand. And I didn't know what it was from originally. Later I found out it was actually his blood because I wasn't cut. But after the glass flies over, I look at him, and he kind of backs up about 6 inches to a foot. And it kind of startled both of us.
That was the first time you'd ever used your gun, right?
Yes, it was.
In all your years as a police officer?
Yes.
What were you thinking?
We were both in shock. That's all. It was shocking having to pull it, but it was also at the same time it was shocking that this was the only option I had, because if I didn't act that way, I wouldn't be sitting right here.
And then what happens?
After I look at him, he's kind of shocked. He gets even angrier. His aggression in his face, the intensity just increases, and he comes back in at me again. And when he comes back in, I just block my face again, and I put my gun up and try to shoot. Well, it doesn't shoot that time either. Now it's jammed again from all the previous interaction with it. So after I take the first hit, I put my hand down, I blindly rack the gun, which is I take my hand on top of the slide and I just bring one back, it ejects around. Again, training just kicked in. I never even thought about it. That's just, your gun jams your racket, you get a new round in there. And when I did that, I wasn't looking at him, I was just like racket, expecting another hit, and I put my gun up and fired. And after I fired that shot, I look over, he's running.
It went off that time.
It did go off that time. He starts to run, and I see the dust cloud behind him, and I'm like, okay, I missed. That was, the round didn't hit him. Then I go to exit my car. And when I'm getting out, I use my walkie, and I say, shots fired, send more cars. And I start chasing after Michael Brown.
You sent that radio message, shots fired, send no cars, but nobody got it.
No.
How come?
Found out later my radio, during all the altercation, which was down on the side, which is where my portable radio was kept, the channel was changed from 1 to 3.
That moment before the second shot, you guys are staring at each other, and you said there was a look in his eye like something you'd never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
You described it as a demon.
Mm-hmm. It was a very, very intense image he was presenting.
Demon?
Very intense.
And what did you think was going on in his mind, and why did you choose the word demon?
I don't really know what was going on in his mind. I was so shocked by the whole interaction because this was escalated so quickly from a simple request to now a fight for survival. And it still doesn't make sense to me why someone would act in that way and be so mad instantly, so aggressive instantly.
He used some tough words with you. You used some tough words with him as well, though, right?
During
when he was on the street?
No, there was no, when we contacted each other, I actually never even said anything to him directly. I had talked to Dorian Johnson directly. He had never even been directly asked to get on the sidewalk. Dorian Johnson was, and his response to me was, you know what I'd stated earlier.
And you're staring at each other, you see this demon.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think he was going to do?
I was prepared for the worst. I mean, I thought when he came back at me, I thought he's just going to punch me until I'm dead or take my gun and shoot me with it. He's already tried it once.
Your gun goes off the second time, and he then does run away.
Yes, he does.
How far does he go?
I don't know, I mean, around 30, 40 feet.
At that moment, you've called for help.
Yes.
Why not stay in the car? He's running away.
Because he's not, my job isn't to just sit and wait. You know, I have to see where this guy goes. My goal wasn't to arrest him. My goal was to maintain visual on him. And I was worried.
I mean, you weren't going to arrest him alone?
Not alone, no. I knew I had backup on the way. I mean, they should be there any second. And I was also worried that if I was another officer responding and I see, you know, again, I think they've heard all this, they know what's going on. If I see a guy running from another officer's car, I'm going to go get him. You know, that's going to be your first reaction is how do we catch him? Well, the way Canfield's set up is there's 2 loops. So where I'm at, there's a loop that goes around and he's running like towards that loop. So the first responding officer is going to go that way and try and cut him off. Well, what's he going to do to them? You know, what's he going to do if a innocent bystander gets in his way on accident? What's he going to do to them?
So you felt it was your duty to give chase?
Yes, it was. That's what we were trained to do.
And he runs out of the car, gets about 30 or 40 feet. You can now get out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
You start to follow him. And then he stops?
He does stop.
Why?
I thought when he originally stopped, he was going to get on the ground, but he didn't. When he stopped, he turned and faced me. And the stutter step that you sometimes see, like when people start to run and they kind of did the hop and then go, he does that. And as he does that, his right hand immediately goes into his waistband. And his left hand is a fist at his side. And he starts charging me.
Right hand in his waistband?
Yes.
It's kind of an odd thing for someone running to do, right? Mm-hmm. What did you think when you saw that?
I didn't know. I mean, my initial thought was, is there a weapon in there? Is there a knife? Is there a brick? What's in there? Why is your hand going there? And, you know, the unknown of what is there drew
Even
my
though he
attention.
hadn't pulled something out earlier when he was confronting you.
It was still just the unknown. And again, we're taught to let me see your hands.
As you know, some of the eyewitnesses have said at that moment when he turned around and put his hands up.
That would be incorrect.
No way?
No way.
So you say he starts to run, does a stutter step, starts to come towards you,
Mm-hmm.
and?
At that time, I gave myself another mental check. Can I shoot this guy? Legally, can I? And the question I answered myself was, I have to. If I don't, he will kill me if he gets to me. He's already overpowered me once. If he gets to me, I will not survive.
Even though he's, 35, 40 feet away?
Once he's coming that direction, if he hasn't stopped yet, when's he going to stop?
So you've already fired twice. He starts to come towards you.
After he's coming at me and I decide to shoot, I fired a series of shots and paused.
What did you see?
I noticed at least one of them hit him. I don't know where, but I saw his body kind of just flinch a little. And after that, I paused and I again yelled, stop, get on the ground. giving him the opportunity to stop. And he ignored all the commands and he just kept running. And so after he kept running again, I shot another series of shots. And at least one of those hit him because I saw the flinch. And he stopped. I stopped and I said, get on the ground, get on the ground. Well, this time he's about 15 feet away. So I start backpedaling because he's just getting too close and he's still not stopping after.
You were backpedaling?
Yes, away from him. Because I was like, he's already running through these shots. I mean, they weren't phasing him. It didn't matter to him. And he was looking through me. The face and the image he was presenting was just, I wasn't even there. Like,
what did you see in that face?
Just aggression. There was nothing. It was like hollow, just looking through me. And as he gets to that 15 feet after I fired the second round of shots, he gets to about 8 to 10 feet. And as he does that, he kind of starts to lean forward like he's going to tackle me. And 8 to 10 feet is close. I mean, if he's going to tackle me, he's going to tackle me at that point. And I looked down my barrel of my gun and I fired, and what I saw was his head, and that's where it went.
Right in the top of his head?
Yes.
Some witnesses have also said that they actually saw you stand over him and shoot in the top of his head.
That'd be incorrect.
And he's down now?
Yes.
You know he's dead?
Yes. Whenever I had actually seen that bullet go into his head, they tell you afterwards, there's going to be times you don't remember where it's fast, sometimes where it's slow. Well, that was the point of like the slow motion for me, and I actually saw that, and I saw the face that he had go blank. Everything was just blank. And when he landed, he had fell face first and actually slid on his face and upper body. And as he did that, his feet had come up in the air from all the momentum he had from running at me. And then when it came to rest, his feet then collapsed. And I knew immediately that he had passed.
And what did you think?
I need help. I got back on the radio and I said, send a supervisor in every car we have, notify EMS.
You'd never even shot your gun before, and now a man is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Does that put you in shock? What is it, what's going through your mind at that point? What are you feeling at that point?
Shock would be a good way to describe it. Whole career, you always know it's a possibility, but you never think it's going to happen. You never really think you're going to have to use your gun. And there's not a cop out there who goes out there and like, I'm going to use my gun today. No one wants to. No one ever wants to do that. And it just happened, and it happened in a minute. And it was shock.
And when you look back at that minute, that 90 seconds on August 9th, and you look back at everything you did and everything that happened, is there anything you could have done differently that would have prevented that killing from taking place?
No.
Nothing?
No.
So you're convinced that everything that happened that day was necessity?
Yes.
And you've gone through that 90 seconds in your mind, must be thousands of times.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing you would have done differently?
No.
What could have happened that would have prevented Michael Brown from dying?
Him complying. If he would have gotten on the sidewalk and followed Dorian Johnson to the sidewalk, I probably never would have noticed cigarillos. I would have gone and gotten lunch and continued my day. He would have continued his.
That's not the way it went down. He's now lying on the street. What happens next?
After the supervisor got there, I gave him the brief rundown of what had happened.
What'd you tell him?
I told him that I had to shoot somebody. And he asked me why. I said, well, he had grabbed my gun and he had charged me and he was going to kill me.
So you killed him first?
Yes.
And he then wants you to get in the back of his car, correct?
No, he actually asked me to go sit in my car.
Sit in your car?
Yes.
You didn't want to do that?
No.
How come?
I was already possible, one being singled out. And I didn't want to have all these other officers around me working the scene, providing security for the scene, and me just sitting in my car. I felt like that would only raise the emotions and make it a more hostile environment.
Were you aware of people around watching what was going on?
When it first started, I don't remember seeing anybody. But just in the walk from where the final shots were fired to where my car was, the streets had begun being populated. And so I told my sergeant, I said, I can't sit in my car. And he's like, well then, I said, if you want me to leave, I'll leave, but I can't sit in the car. He goes, get in my car and go back to the station. And that's what I did.
Drove yourself back?
Yes.
Meanwhile, Michael Brown is on the street. And this has all happened, as you said, so fast.
Mm-hmm.
You described, I guess, the fear you were thinking. You thought he was coming after you.
Yes.
On the street. Was any part of you angry?
No.
No anger?
No. There was no time for anger. Like I said, training took over with survival mode.
Because some of the witnesses have said they thought you were out of control, that somehow you had snapped.
That would be incorrect. There was never, the only emotion I'd ever felt was fear, and then it was survival and training.
And the training kicked in.
Training took over. It didn't just kick in, it took over.
And in your training, there was no option in those moments when you were faced with Michael Brown but to shoot.
Correct.
What about, and I don't know enough about the training to know this, what about when he's coming towards you? Why not run behind the car?
Run away? How do you run? I mean,
You just don't do that.
you can't run away. That's not what we're there for. If we ran away every time something scared us, every time we heard a noise in the night, we wouldn't be very good at our job. We're taught and trained to deal with the threat at hand. And that's what I did.
Then you drove yourself back to the police station.
Correct.
And you have to give a report. What do you do next?
I actually called for the Fraternal Order of Police, which is like the union hall for police officers, and notified the attorney that had been involved in an officer-involved shooting.
Did you know this was going to be trouble?
No. I really didn't know what to expect. I've never been in this situation before. But I notified him. He arrived, and then shortly thereafter is when the St. Louis County detectives arrived.
And they started to question you?
Yes.
And at that point, do you immediately just give the after-action report, tell everything that happened?
Yes.
And how long, I assume that story pretty much conforms to what you told the grand jury, what you've told us
Yes.
today? Or is there some way that, and I know some people sometimes when they're in the moment, they don't remember everything and things come back to them later. Is there any part of your story that you didn't get right then?
No. I've had the same statement since 2 hours after the incident.
And then you went to the hospital
Yes.
and got treated for, describe your injuries.
I had bruising and swelling on both sides of my face and some scratches around my neck.
Meanwhile, Michael Brown's, I guess, and this has nothing to do with you. Meanwhile, Michael Brown is out there lying in the street.
I had no knowledge of what was going on the street.
I guess for several hours.
Yes.
When did you realize that this was going to become something much bigger than you imagined?
That night watching the protests on TV, I was like, what just happened? Why is this happening? And that's when we're kind of like, this is something. We just don't know what yet.
And that's when you start to hear the stories, I assume, of you shot an unarmed teenager. You shot someone trying to surrender. You're a killer. You're a racist. How does that hit you?
It hurts. That's not who I am at all. And all these people making me out to be something I'm not, all I wanted to do was live. That was it.
And you're absolutely convinced, when you look through your heart and your mind, that if Michael Brown were white, this would have gone down in exactly the same way?
Yes.
No question.
No question.
How did this all happen?
Just as I told you, it was just, I don't know. It still doesn't make sense to me why it all started and went down that way. I don't know.
And then you start to see the protest, you start to hear the stories, yet you go silent, knowing that out there in the world, a very different picture of Darren Wilson is starting to be painted. A picture of a man who executed someone. Didn't you want to scream out, here's what happened?
Of course, but you can't.
How come?
You have to protect the integrity of the investigation and the judicial process. That was our goal from day one. We're not going to try the case in the media. We will protect the integrity of this investigation.
So you told your story to your supervisors, you answered the detectives, and you basically disappeared.
Stayed under the radar.
How'd you do that?
Carefully. Just have to be careful.
Tell us a little bit more about what it's been like since August 9th to essentially be living in hiding.
It's actually kind of hard to describe. I've used the word stressful, but that's an understatement. You're always looking, you're always wondering if someone recognized you, if someone is following you, if just every possibility you can think of.
Were you out doing normal things, going to the store, taking walks in the neighborhood?
At times. I mean, there was sometimes where I had to, you know. Normally I tried to avoid it.
You grew a beard.
I did have a beard for a little while.
Did that help?
I think so. I mean, it was uncomfortable, but I think it helped. It's just take precautions, everything you do, everywhere you go, you know, from where you sit in a restaurant to, you know, where you drive, everything. Everything has to run through your head. It's all the time you're watching, make sure no one's following you, everything. You know, you hear or see someone look at you, then lean over and tell someone a secret, and then that second person looks at you, like, do they know who I am? You know, that's the first thing. It goes, do I need to leave? You know, or that person's looked at me for too long, you know, are they trying to figure something out? And always.
So this is all happening. Your world's kind of getting smaller.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the President of the United States is discussing your case. The Justice Department is investigating. Grand juries looking into this. There are protests going up all around the country, and this is all swirling around you, but you feel you can't say a word.
No, I can't.
Washington Post had a great line. They said, Darren Wilson's the man who everyone has an opinion about, but no one knows.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most important thing you want the American people to know about you right now?
I'm really just a simple guy. That's all I am. I mean, I do family things. Spend a lot of time at home with the family. You know, casual events. We're just simple, everyday, normal people. There's really nothing special or anything about it. We're just normal people.
You actually got married,
We did.
and you're about to have a baby as well.
Yes.
So a lot's been happening in your life while this is going around. You say you're a simple guy, yet you're being defined.
Mm-hmm.
And you know this. You're being defined out there in the world. And a lot of people, even right now, even as the evidence is coming out, believe you're not a simple guy. You're not someone who was in danger that day. You're someone who some believe killed in cold blood. That's got to hurt for people to think that.
It does, but again, they don't know who Darren Wilson is.
And does it hurt you to know that Michael Brown is dead?
I feel sorry that his life was lost, yes. Never want to take a life, ever, in any capacity.
And you're convinced that anyone who believes that part of you is motivated by some kind of racial animus, some kind of racism, they're wrong.
They are wrong. You can't perform the duties of a police officer and have racism in you. I help people. That's my job.
You worked in African American neighborhoods for a long time.
Yes.
You have described, though, that neighborhood where you encountered Michael Brown as an anti-police neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
There's a lot of criminal activity. There's drugs, there's guns, there's burglaries, there's just assaults, violence. That's one of our high crime areas for the city.
And as you walked the beat every day, as you drove that car every day, was there tension every single day?
No, I mean, you're always on guard. You have to be. You can't ever let your guard down anywhere you are. You could be in the nicest neighborhood in the world, but you still have to have your guard up. The moment you let it down is the moment something happens to you. So you're always watching, you're always aware.
But you had never encountered Michael Brown before?
No, I've
Never seen him?
Never seen him.
In all that time?
No.
And he had never been in trouble with the law as far as you know?
I have no idea.
And in these days then, when you're waiting for the grand jury to decide, you testified to the grand jury for what, about 4 hours?
I was there for 4 hours.
What was that experience like?
It was different being on that end of the table. You know, normally as a police officer, you're on the other side of things. But I knew it was part of the process. I knew that I didn't have anything to hide, and I just had to go in there and tell them what happened.
And at the end of that process, did you have a sense of what they were going to do?
I always had the sense that I was going to be okay, but again, I don't know. I mean, those are 12 people I've never met or know anything about, and that was their job, is to decide what was going to happen.
It does really seem like even from the moment this all went down in those 90 seconds, that you have a very clean conscience. Mm-hmm. And so there's just, you would imagine that when you go back in that time and think, boy, what happened here? What could I have done? That something would grab hold of you and say, wait a second, maybe this could have been different. Maybe it could have worked out a different way. Nothing?
The reason I have a clean conscience is because I know I did my job right.
And the grand jury has decided they're not going to file any charges. Yet that has led to a lot of anger out there. right now, even in the time that you were in hiding, you see a bounty on your head. Are you still scared?
Of course.
What's your biggest worry?
Someone hurting my family or another officer getting hurt.
The Brown family came out with a statement last night where they said, "We are profoundly disappointed that the killer of our child will not face the consequences of his actions." What do you think when you hear that?
I think those are grieving parents who are mourning the loss of their son.
What do you want to say to them?
I'm sorry that their son had to lose his life.
And it had to be?
Had to.
They're saying that you have to face the consequences of your actions.
Mm-hmm.
You think there's anything you can say to them that could change their minds or change their hearts?
I don't think there's anything they could say, but again, I'm sorry that their son lost his life. It wasn't the intention of that day. It's what occurred that day. And there's nothing you can say that's going to make a parent feel better.
You use the passive tense there a lot. It occurred that day. He lost his life. It sounds like you don't think you're responsible.
I did my job that day.
His family is pushing very hard for to have body cameras on all police. What do you think that body camera would have shown?
Exactly what I told you.
So you'd be happy to wear one?
Yes.
You think it's a good idea, actually, for police to wear those?
I mean, it's another way of, to me, it works both sides. It's going to prove the innocence of police officers when they say it, but it's also going to weed out the bad ones. It's also going to limit the complaints because someone can't make a false complaint against a police officer if it's on tape.
What were the relations like in that community every single day as you were working? I mean, you talked about a criminal element, drugs and crime and things like that. Did you feel any kind of racial tension there?
No, Ferguson loves Ferguson. That community loves its community. When people say it's a diverse community, it is a diverse community. That is a very proactive community.
But the police force is overwhelmingly white and the community is predominantly African American.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't create tension? That didn't create problems?
Not with me.
Had you ever had any kind of a racial incident?
No.
And never been accused of acting in a racist manner?
No.
So this was a unique circumstance in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
How much did it take you by surprise?
It takes me by surprise every day. Just because the grand jury ruled a decision yesterday doesn't mean everything's over. It's still everyone saw what happened last night. Still evolving, still going on.
You think there's anything you can do? It may be beyond your power, but do you think there's anything you can do to help lessen the tension going forward?
If there is, I don't know what it is.
Any way for you to reach out?
I don't really know how or if that would even be appropriate.
And your biggest message to the protesters right now?
Peace.
And what's the most important thing? You've told your story. What's the most important thing you want them to know about what happened in those 90 seconds?
I did my job and followed my training.
And there were no options?
No options.
Do you feel any remorse?
Everyone feels remorse when a life's lost. Like I told you before, I never wanted to take anybody's life. That's not the good part of the job. That's the bad part of the job. So yes, there is remorse.
And this was the only time it happened?
Yes.
And when you see the parents, when you see the anger, do you think that there's something more that all police can do in your situation?
What do you mean by that?
What do you think is at the heart of this anger that just seems to be seething throughout Ferguson? You say Ferguson loves Ferguson. Sure didn't look like that last night. It seems like there's a lot of anger beneath the surface.
I think there's a communication breakdown. Communication has to be reestablished.
Between?
Everybody, all parties involved.
But you feel like you had that in your day-to-day work on the force.
Yes. I greatly enjoyed working in Ferguson, I did.
Put that in the past tense, not going to happen again?
Do you really think it's possible? I mean, you think they would accept me? Do you think it'd be safe for me? Those are all questions, not only for me, for the other officers. Is my detention brought to me going to hurt one of them? Can I put them in that situation?
So you're going to resign the force?
We don't know that yet. No decisions have been made. But these are all things we're contemplating, ideas. thoughts.
What do you want to do going forward?
Just live a normal life.
Is that possible anymore?
It's going to be different. There'll be a new normal, but we'll find it somehow.
Can that normal be here?
Have to wait and see. We don't have any idea what's going to be the new normal. It's a day-by-day process for us.
You and your wife.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about those possibilities, what is it, I don't even know if this word is appropriate anymore. What is your dream going forward?
Like I said, we just want to have a normal life. That's it.
I guess it's hard to have a normal life after someone is lying dead.
Mm-hmm.
Something you think that will always haunt you?
I don't think it's a haunting. It's always going to be something that happened.
Listening to you, it is very clear. You firmly believe, and this has been your story throughout, that at every step in that process, Michael Brown made the wrong choice.
Yes.
And you're convinced that at every step in that process, you made the right choice.
Yes.
And to those who disagree, you say?
Everyone's going to have their thoughts. I can't control what they believe or think.
You can just control your actions.
Correct.
Your statements.
Correct.
President Obama called this a tragedy last night. Is he right?
Wouldn't it be a tragedy every time a life is lost? Doesn't matter by what means, where, or who. A life is lost. It's obviously a tragedy.
So you are sorry for that?
Yeah. No one wants to cause a life to be lost. No one.
Tonight, you'll go back home, and if the protests continue, is there anything else you think you can say or do?
I don't really know what it would be. I just pray for the safety of the officers and everyone else. I mean, those officers have an incredible task ahead of them, and I just don't want to see them get hurt.
You described Michael Brown earlier, when you saw him in that moment in the car, as a demon. Do you know where that word came from? Do you know, what were you seeing at that moment?
Like I said, it was just such a high level of intensity and aggression and anger that it was almost unfathomable to even see it. Like, how is this happening? Like, it was shock.
And you're positive you'd have that exact same reaction if he were white?
Yes.
You're still facing investigations.
Yes.
Justice Department has a civil rights investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Does that worry you?
Wouldn't it worry anybody if they have an investigation open against them? Again, I stand by what I did. I stand by my training. And I have to wait and see what they determine.
And they're going to look through your entire record. It's a different threshold. They're going to look through your entire record and see, is there any way he was motivated by some kind of racial hatred, by some kind?
I'm sure they will.
What will they find?
Nothing.
So you're confident, again, that they won't, even though you have an understandable worry, you're confident that no charges will be brought?
Yes.
How do you live a normal life after this?
I don't know yet. I don't know. We don't know. Like I said, it's day by day.
But like you said, it's probably unlikely you can continue as a police officer.
Yes.
Anything else you've ever wanted to do?
Not really. I mean, that was the job of my life. Loved it. I pictured being there on, my only goal was to be promoted to sergeant. That's all I ever wanted. I wanted to stay on the road for 30 years and then retire as a sergeant and then just have a retirement. That's all I've ever wanted.
You love being a police officer?
I love it. I love being on the road as a police officer.
Now you have to find something new.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way you think you can take what you learn, what you've experienced, because you now have a unique place in this culture, in this country. Is there any way you can turn what you experienced, what you were a part of, into something good?
I would love to teach people. I'd love to give people more insight on uses of force and anything I can, anything that I can get out of this career I've had thus far and of the incident. I would love to give someone else, to just give them more insight, more knowledge, whatever their cause is for.
I want to get back to one other thing that some eyewitnesses have said. We know from the autopsy reports that no shots went into Michael Brown from the back.
Mm-hmm.
Did you fire any shots when he was running away?
No.
So you only fired to his front?
Correct.
And when he was by the car?
Correct.
How do you think this happened, that so many different stories came out?
I don't know. I'm sure social media had a role in it, but like I said, I don't know.
And you said you didn't see Dorian Johnson after Michael Brown reached back with those cigarillos.
Correct.
So you had no idea whether he could actually see what was happening.
Yeah, I have no idea where he was. He was not in any sight that I saw.
Were you aware of any people around who could have been seeing exactly what was happening at that moment?
During the initial confrontation? No. I remember seeing a couple cars parked behind me. I just remember one being a green Pontiac. That's all I remember. I don't know where they went, what happened to them, what they saw, what they didn't saw. I don't know.
I guess really the only final question I have is, what's the most important thing that people need to believe about Darren Wilson?
I just did my job. I did what I was paid to do, and that was my job. I followed my training. The training took over. The training led me to what happened. I maintained the integrity of this investigation. That's it.